you'd have a hard time creating a depreciation schedule for something like that.
No. Although, are you familiar with software engineering at all?
I am not a software person, no, I'm afraid.
Well, in software engineering, which is very analogous to, how we would answer the question that you're asking, you've done a good job of assimilating the principle. Yes. Can a person overpay against their home? Oh, absolutely. But the equity that they build up accumulates in their accounts, just as it would savings. So although that's a little bit of a concept that's a little bit foreign to, what we generally want to, perceive things to be, that's what it is. So does savings, for instance, damage a true economy? No, not really, because we have far more to save. First of all, it's far easier to save, and we actually need to cultivate the disposition to saving. So instead of doing something like Social Security, we might decide amongst ourselves to impose upon each individual an obligation to save themselves so that they can sustain a standard of living however they might in later life. Answer these questions themselves. But in Ron Paul forums, they want to say that all these implementation issues would invalidate mathematically perfected economy, that there's no such thing as mathematically perfected economy. Well, of course, that's a matter of a purposed prejudice against a set of principles. The principles are perfect, and that's what mathematically perfected is. In other words, mathematically perfected economy is. It's a resolution of the principles. And it basically, said in its simplest form, is just two things: eradication of interest and retirement of principal on a schedule of payment, which is no less than the rate of consumption or depreciation. Now, what we really want to do is add a fine point to that, and that is that the concept of the lifespan of the ownership or the term of finance has to be equivalent to the shortest potential usage or consumption, if you will, of the item. So in the case of gold, for instance, say we've bought some gold. We're a hardware manufacturer, and we've bought gold for the purpose of using it in electrical contacts in computer, in computers, so hardware of some kind. Well, we might finance the purchasing of the gold for that production, deciding among ourselves what are reasonable limitations to apply to this. Because, as you said, your question pertains to, gold doesn't expire. You don't really consume it. You can put it on something and use it as part of something, but then you can recover it and it still exists. It's not actually consumed, not at least in intelligent management of resources. So if you were a producer, you might buy some gold to use in your electrical contacts, and we might say, okay, well, we'll finance that, even though the gold isn't consumed, but only so long as you need to possess them for production, because we don't want to engender an artificial demand for gold. We'll give everybody, we'll finance the purchase of gold to anyone and everyone. No, if your intent is genuine to use this gold in something that there's a proven demand for and need for it, we will finance it, but only for a short while. So, say for instance, you're a startup, you're entering a field with some new technology that actually makes you not just a viable competitor in your market, but you're going to be possibly the top top dog. You've built prototypes, you've demonstrated this, and so you've got an actual model to show the financial people, hey, well, look, our problem is we need, whatever, let's just say $200,000 worth of tooling, and we need these raw materials that we need to purchase, and altogether we need $250,000 of financing, and let's just say, because all they're doing is plating these contacts with a fine film of gold, that $5,000 or $10,000 worth of gold in the beginning goes a long way. But only until we can assemble all this together can we give ourselves the green light that we can go ahead and make these things, which requires capital that we don't have. Okay. But so we, as our own government of this thing that I call a common monetary foundry, decide the principles that we're going to adhere to here. And although they have to be expressed in a more universal form according to this mandate, what we're doing basically is we're going to decide that, okay, these guys, if they can get this money, they can purchase the gold is available, this is what it will cost, they need $5,000 worth of it, and this will go into product in their production over their first 9 months, 12 months of production, which production isn't going to start for 4 months after they get the money, procure the gold, and collect all these things that they need to incorporate in their eventual production. So we might decide that, okay, we'll finance the gold for the 4 months, or we'll finance the gold for the 4 months plus the 9 months of production, plus maybe we decide that we'll allow them this product to sit on the shelf for 3 months or a year. And so we might say instead that we'll finance gold going into production on an initial product. In such a case, we'll finance it for 2 years, provided that the amount of gold is only what's going to go into the product, so on and so forth. So we safeguard ourselves against against engendering an artificial demand for gold, which may or may not drive its price up depending on whatever the market conditions are. You see, so so basically, what I'm saying mathematically perfected economy is the principles that you have to adhere to do it right. Now, you bring up a very good question, which is an implementation issue, all right? And your question has been asked many times before. It's a great question. When somebody asks, if that's your first question, you're obviously a student of all this, and you're thinking along the lines that you have to think along. Now, I'm not saying that every public is going to perfectly implement mathematically perfected economy, because you're confronted with issues like this which you have to resolve. But nonetheless, what we want to do is to not affect markets in any artificial way. We want to pay off our promissory obligations at the rate of consumption or depreciation. Now, so we might say, for instance, in this case, well, they're not even going to have this stuff in the eventual marketplace for a year. And that's reasonable. This is the pattern of all production. And then, according to whatever else is selling in that market already, that should be consumed in a year. That's the pattern. And they aren't really a significant initial mathematic presence in terms of the numbers of the product. They're not really affecting that much what's existing, offered presently to these markets. And so we should expect that their product, being as it performs, and they've shown that it performs as it's supposed to, that it will be consumed over a year also. So at the end of that year, we want that gold paid for, and we might, being as it's going to be a year before it starts selling, maybe we might not force them to begin to sell it until, or pay for it until the beginning of their sales. So that might begin the period of, which they service their promissory obligation, and then they're to pay it off at a rate. We might even make the rate proportional to their sales, because that's the true consumption of gold by them. Now the market has it. You see, so so we devise a scheme that abides by these principles is our challenge in society. Now, in most cases, that's not very difficult. We know how long a car should last, and if a car lasts longer than that, I mean, a fellow asked in a Ron Paul forum the other day, well, what about me? I've got this, I think it was a 1989 Chevy pickup truck of some kind or something like that. And, and he says it's in perfect condition still, and he wouldn't think of driving anything else, but his truck isn't worth zero. No, it's not. But if we had a standard rate of payment based on a general expected lifespan, your confirmation to that pattern is basically what ensures society that you're paying it off at a sufficiently fast enough clip that we're not penalized. So, and that's the thing that we're really trying to avoid there. It doesn't mean that your truck is worth nothing when you've taken just fabulous care of it and restored it, and it's a collector's item. It might be worth now, at the end of its lifespan, more than it was new, okay? And we could even decide to finance that for a collector, although I don't think that would be a wise thing to do. But adhering to the principles of mathematically perfected economy, you could do such a thing, and without penalty. In other words, I'm a world-renowned cane fly rod maker, and long retired, but my rods are, I was, selling my work was selling brand new. For the prices that the highest collectors were, getting for their most collectible work was fetching for, like a top-of-the-line Garrison or something like that. My brand new prices were those prices, which were a fraction of what you would have been paid for that kind of machine work and so on and so forth. Well, my rods are valued, way up there now. And but would I advocate financing a rod like that? I said you can do it, but I actually wouldn't encourage that. Why? Because then you confuse all these issues. Of course, we can all be so intelligent that all works out. But let's face it, we're in the state of an infant now in understanding economy. We've been lied to for 100 years, and we have to understand the issues that causes. And let's keep it simple in the beginning. Frankly, I wouldn't advocate that probably. I can't think of it, and of course it's been an issue that's been on my mind for many, many years, but I wouldn't advocate, doing such a thing as financing collectibles, for instance, because they've been paid for, and there's a huge amount of circulation that's actually available to us that isn't available to us now. And is dedicated solely toward whatever we, servicing all the debts, but just to pay principal out of circulation at the rate of consumption or depreciation, which is a lot lower rate of payment, than a minimized life cycle, as is the typical, lifespan of a loan today. So not only are we not paying interest, but we're paying off the principal at a much lower rate as well under mathematically perfected economy. So that allows people to do things like pay a lot for something. A guy like Bill Gates wouldn't have hardly paid any taxes in his lifetime under mathematically perfected economy because it reduces the cost of government. So what happens? He can afford to buy a Montagne fly rod if he wants for $250,000. The money is there. So, I say keep it simple, myself. In truth, you could consider a service, a property even, say for instance an education, So you could fund education under mathematically perfected economy, which would dramatically reduce its cost. But likewise, you could still consider it a property and allow kids to go to college, assuming a debt for their education and paid it off themselves, where it's, a benefit to them and a responsibility to them to make the best use of it. They don't go to college to just party anymore. They go to college to, to actually to learn. Well, like we finance education right now, we could do it under mathematically perfected economy and say, well, though it's a service, there isn't actually physical property that's reflected here, and the general rate of consumption, we could figure it to be 20 years.